Random thoughts. In this video, we are going to look at an emperor who was brought down by what was happening far away from his empire. And I'm talking about an Ethiopian emperor here. Now, in Ethiopia, Emperor Menelik II is considered to be the father of modern Ethiopia. But if Emperor Menelik is the father of modern Ethiopia, then Emperor Tewodros II is the grandfather of modern Ethiopia. Now, Emperor Tewodros, or Emperor Theodore, he ruled Ethiopia as an emperor between 1855 to 1868. Now, he didn't inherit the throne, he fought for it. And after becoming emperor, Emperor Tewodros changed the path that Ethiopia took. Now, Emperor Tewodros, his name was Kasa Hailu. That's the name he was given at birth. His paternal side of family was noble. They were nobles. And the same case to his maternal side. His father and mother divorced while he's a very young kid. And he goes with his mother, but almost immediately the father dies. Kasa Hailu did go to school, nevertheless. He is also given some military training by someone. During this time, Ethiopia is going through what came to be known as Zemene Mesafint. Now, this is a period between 1769 and 1855, when Ethiopia was basically ruled by lords. These lords were mostly of Oromo origin. The emperor remained. The seat of the emperor continued to be occupied by someone from either Amhara or Tigrayan or Tigrinya descent. But the actual rulers, the actual power was in the hands of the lords, who were basically Oromo noblemen. Also, at the time when Kasa Hailu is a young person or a young man, Ethiopia was undergoing something we can call like a civil war. And these lords, even though they were basically all Oromo people, they were fighting one another. And the reason they were fighting, each wanted to be the one that controls the person who becomes the emperor. So there was some sort of a civil war going on. Kasa Hailu grows into a young man, and he has this education that he has received. He has also received some military training. And he puts together a small army, and his first goal was to get back the seat that his father occupied as a governor in his home area of Kwara. And he manages to do that, and he takes that seat, and then now he expands his ambitions, and now he wants to conquer the entire of Abyssinia or Ethiopia. And he goes against now the lords, and he forms a small army that grows over time. And the people, the public generally like him because he was so understanding and he was so generous to the public, and it is said that he would get money from the lords and he would distribute this money to the peasants. He would give them the money to buy hoes and seeds to plant. And he also took land from the lords and he distributed this land to the peasants. And so the people came to like him a lot, and because of that, he got so many people to join his cause and to join the army that he was forming and to fight the lords. That's how he grew in power over time. Now, finally, in 1855, he had basically conquered the entire land of Abyssinia, and he had basically defeated all the lords that were there, or at least the majority. He declares himself emperor, and he takes the name of Tewodros II. He becomes emperor, and not just emperor figurehead, but a powerful emperor. Now, he makes some changes immediately. For example, he sets up a standby army. This was a new idea in Ethiopia, apparently. And he then makes governors and judges to be civil servants who are paid a salary. This was the first time that was happening in Ethiopia. And then he moved the capital of the empire from Gondar to Magdala. But less than 10 years, about 7 years after coming to power, Tewodros became very unpopular in Ethiopia because he was a little bit harsh in the way he handled some issues. And in fact, that played a major role into the end or into his doom. There were rebels emerging all over the country, and he was facing revolts from the people, but he still had control of the empire. But more concerning to him was the actions or the activities of Egypt and Sudan. And then he also was worried about the actions of the Muslim Oromos within the country. They were basically spreading and expanding. And because of these concerns, he writes a letter to Queen Victoria, and he wants help. And the help he wants is to be sent people who will train his people on how to create and manufacture weapons. In fact, he wanted Great Britain to help Ethiopia stop Egypt, Sudan, and the Ottoman Empire from interfering with internal affairs of Ethiopia. Now, he writes a letter, this is 1862, he writes a letter to Queen Victoria, and he hands this letter to the British consul in Ethiopia, a guy who went by the name Captain Charles Duncan Cameron. He demands, or he asks that Captain Charles Duncan Cameron take this letter and hands it over in person to Queen Victoria. Now, this guy goes to the coast. Instead of taking the ship to go to Great Britain, of course, he makes inquiries about what to do with this letter. And he's told by the Foreign Office not to bring the letter to Great Britain, but to just hand it over to someone who will take it to Great Britain. And he does that. And then he doesn't come back to Ethiopia. He goes to Sudan to handle some issues that were going on there. All this time, Tewodros thinks that this guy took his letter to Great Britain. Now, shortly after, Cameron comes back to Ethiopia, and it is at this point that Tewodros learns that this guy did not take his letter to Great Britain, and of course he's not happy about it. He becomes so angry, and he demands answers, of course. Now, what angered even more is that this Cameron guy was in the countries that Tewodros considered to be the enemies of Ethiopia, that is Sudan, Egypt, and the Ottoman Empire. Now, Cameron told Tewodros not to worry. The letter reached the Queen, and he was going to receive a reply very soon. But the reply did not come because the Foreign Office just filed the letter as pending and didn't hand over the letter to the Queen. And they had reasons why they did that. And the reasons why Britain was so cautious or didn't want to help Tewodros with his demands of getting weapons to fight Sudan, Egypt, and the Ottoman Empire is because Britain at this point had its own concerns and its own goals and interests. For example, Britain did not want to start what could be seen as a Christian crusade war against the Muslims. They wanted to build more cooperation with Muslims, and in particular, of course, Egypt and Sudan and the Ottoman Empire. And that is because these countries were strategically located. For example, of course, Egypt was at the Suez Canal, of course, and the Ottoman Empire also controlled that region. And now there was another reason why they wanted to be friendly with the Sudanese. Great Britain wanted to have the road or the highway to India, of course, through the Mediterranean Sea and then the Suez Canal, and of course, all the way to the Red Sea and then all the way to India. That's what they wanted to retain. So they understood that by helping the Tewodros fight the Egyptians and the Sudanese and the Ottoman Empire, they were going to jeopardize that, and they did not want to do that. They also wanted to remain friendly to the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Empire kind of like served as a buffer zone against the Russians, so the British were not very comfortable with that during this time. And they also were worried about the supply of cotton. At this point, the American Civil War is going on, and because of that, Great Britain is not getting a supply of cotton from the New World, North America. Now it was relying on supplies from Egypt and Sudan. So they did not want to jeopardize that by trying to help Tewodros with his own issues. Now, 2 years went by and Tewodros did not receive a reply, of course, from the Queen. And that did not make him happy. And because of that, he arrests Cameron, the guy he had sent to deliver the letter to Queen Victoria. And he puts him in prison, and not just him, but several other Europeans who were in Ethiopia, especially the British. He puts them in detention, and because he wanted Queen Victoria to hear about that and to act on his letter. Of course, Queen Victoria hears about this, and she sent someone, a guy who went by the name of Ahmuz Razam, to go and try to talk to Tewodros about the issues he had. And Razam arrives in Ethiopia, but here is a problem. Razam does not come with what Tewodros wanted, which was people to train his people on how to manufacture weapons. That's what he wanted, and assistance, of course, to fight the Egyptians and the Sudanese and the Ottoman Empire. This guy arrives with just words, and he did not like that. He arrests him as well and throws him into detention. Now he has this huge number of Europeans, and British in particular, who he is holding because the Queen Victoria was not acting the way he wanted. Now, of course, by arresting ambassadors and arresting people who've been sent by the Queen, of course, that was not going to make the British like him or help him in any way. In fact, now he was in another problem. Now he was facing the wrath of the British because he had breached what is called the diplomatic immunity. And of course, the rest of the world was not going to step in because you don't do that. Now, Britain sends close to 30,000 soldiers to Ethiopia. This is what came to be known as the British expedition to Abyssinia, which happened in 1868. Now, these 30,000 troops, they come to Abyssinia or Ethiopia. And at this point, of course, Tewodros has a lot of enemies within the empire. The lords who used to rule, of course, they want him gone because he had taken away power from them. He had taken land from them. So they were not happy with him, of course. So they were very ready to have the British fight Tewodros, and that's what happened. So when they come to Ethiopia in 1868, the British have allies on the ground, and of course they start the war against Tewodros. By April of that year, the British were basically outside the headquarters of Tewodros at Magdala. And the emperor at this point realized that he had no chance of fighting the British, and he wanted to talk to them. He wanted to discuss peace, but the British at this point were not willing to discuss anything with Tewodros. The British, of course, attacked his headquarters. He was successful at basically eliminating the entire of Tewodros' army. And when Tewodros realized that he did not have a chance, he could not negotiate peace, he ended himself, he offed himself. And the British come, they find that he's dead. And the British, being British, or like most Europeans did in Africa, they shave his hair and they take it, go with it to Britain for some weird reasons. They also take a lot of artifacts from Ethiopia, a lot of things they pick from Ethiopia and take them to Europe. And these things are spread in many museums in Europe. Some of them have been returned as very recent as 2019, including the hair of Tewodros. Now, Tewodros had several kids, but 3 are the ones that are known. The younger son is the one who was born to Empress Tiruwok. This boy was known as Alemayehu. Now, Alemayehu, there is an entire different story about him. When the father was killed, he was taken to Britain and he was raised by Queen Victoria. But at the age of 19, he died. And Queen Victoria apparently writes a note that this boy was very sad, depressed, because he was in a foreign land and he was not happy there. Now, the daughter of Emperor Tewodros became the wife of Emperor Menelik, his first wife. And that's how Emperor Menelik ended up being related to Tewodros through marriage. There is a son who went by the name Meshesha Tewodros. Now, this is a son who was born outside wedlock. It seems like he did not have a very good relationship with his father, because while the father was emperor and the father had issues with Menelik, and he had put Menelik in prison, sort of, this is the son who helped Menelik escape. When Menelik became emperor, Meshesha, of course, was rewarded. He became a very, we can say, influential person in the government of Menelik II, and he was given titles. That's how Tewodros fell, because the global geopolitics worked against him. Most likely, if the British didn't have to work with the Sudanese and the Egyptians and the Turks, then it's likely that they would have sent in help for Tewodros, and maybe history would have taken a different path. Random thoughts.